very few days will go by without some mention of Mount Etna. I mean, it is Europe's most active volcano, so it will get its fair share of press, and it is so worth it when it does. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History from the Weather Network in Canada. I said it yesterday, and that is every legend has a beginning. And for Mount Etna, that was this day in weather history. On March 8, 1669, Mount Etna on the island of Sicily in modern-day Italy began rumbling. The locals likely took no notice of it because prior to this day, this magnificent mountain had only really been the subject of ancient Greek mythology. You see, if I may, apparently Zeus, the god of sky and thunder, who rules as king of the gods from his throne high atop Mount Olympus, had trapped the deadly monster Typhon under this mountain. Present day, Mount Etna. So who or what was Typhon? Typhon was a grisly monster with 100 dragon's heads. Okay, read on. He was also the youngest son of Gaia, also known as Earth, and Tartarus, which was the god of the netherworld. Interesting stuff, and these stories date back as far as the 8th century BC. This is all just a fun intro to show you how Etna has been relevant for far longer than it has been recognized as one of the world's most active volcanoes and continues today in an almost constant state of activity. Right, so that's some Etna 101 for today, class, and some Greek mythology. I threw that in for free. You're welcome. Anyhow, let's fast forward now almost 10,000 years to the year 1669. The rumbles of this mountain had increased with frequency and intensity, and then it happened. There was not just one. There were several eruptions over weeks that followed this day in weather history, killing more than 20,000 likely confused and unprepared people, leaving virtually everyone else homeless. Here's the grim reality of being unprepared and so completely oblivious of what they were actually facing. Most of those who perished didn't actually have to. They could have booked it out of there, but they chose to stay and save their city. But that, of course, was an act in futility, because when the Earth belches directly from its core, there is absolutely nothing, anything in this universe could do about it but try to outrun it and get somewhere safe. Remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, for instance, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, and oftentimes it will include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story here, go check out the podcast video short on television in Canada or online anywhere at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. All right, now, everybody take your seats. It's time for geography class. The mountain dominates the island of Sicily. It towers to a height of 11,000 feet above sea level in the northeast section of Sicily. It is so mighty that it can be seen from just about every part of the island. And this island has had its own history with forces of nature. For instance, the year 1169, 500 years earlier, an earthquake that preceded an eruption killed 15,000 people back then. You see, although 1669 is credited for being the first major eruption of Mount Etna, there is empirical evidence that suggests that a geologic history of Mount Etna is really not as easy as it seems. In fact, it has been periodically spewing ash and lava for thousands upon thousands of years, and the first recorded eruption of the volcano was closer actually to 475 BC. Let's get back to our story now, out of the year 1669. Etna began to rumble and belch gas on this March 8th date. The residents living at its base ignored the warning signs of a coming larger eruption. Remember, off the top I said this went on for weeks. Then just 3 days later, the volcano began spewing out noxious fumes in large quantities. And that killed close to 3,000 people living on the slopes of the mountain from asphyxiation. But Etna was not done. It was only warming up. The situation had every, quote, tell that something really, really big and bad was about to happen. The mountain began emitting tremendous amounts of ash and molten lava, and it was getting more and more ferocious in its expulsion of matter. The ash was sent out with such intense force that significant amounts eventually settled to the earth across the water and on the southern part of mainland Italy. This is in some places nearly 100 miles away. Lava also began pouring down the side of the mountain heading toward the city of Catania, 18 miles to the south along the sea. It had gone critical, and time was now up for anyone who did not leave but stayed behind to fight this mighty foe. This day in weather history. Tomorrow is March 9th. 300 American bombers dropped almost 2,000 tons of incendiaries on Tokyo, Japan. But how the weather played into this, making it so much worse, and what happened as a result, is all tomorrow on this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.